Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm doing an interview with Darby Karchut. Sorry if I said that wrong, by the way. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. I've been really excited to do this, and let's get into the video. Hi, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Hi guys, welcome back to Wild Willie's Book Reviews. Today I'm with author Darby Karchut. So is there anything you kind of want to say about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me here, William. This is going to be a fun visit. Something that people always ask me is, did you always want to be a writer? And surprisingly, I never thought about being a writer, ever. When I was growing up, I just wanted to read fantasy adventure books and play outside and pretend I was those characters from the books as I played outside. But that playfulness never really went away. It was buried, but it was not forgotten. And then it kind of resurfaced about 11 years ago. And I thought, I'm going to try to write my own story. And I did. And it was terrible because I have no clue how to write. And so I had to rewrite my first novel, probably 30 times before I got it right. But boy, I tell you, nothing teaches you how to write like writing. So I learned a lot, and with each book, I learned more and more. And I was just thinking, next week will be the 10-year anniversary of my very first published work for young adults. And I can't believe it's been 10 years, and it has been the best 10 years.
So I noticed that I was like looking up all your books, and I noticed that you have a lot of books written like adults and kids. Did you kind of have a favorite topic to write about, like even with all books?
I do have a recurring theme in all my books, and that almost always, besides, and I really like writing middle grade and young adult books best, but in all my books, there always appears a character who's kind of a good guy, and he's usually an adult, a strong father figure. And so many times kids' books, the parents are absent, or the parents aren't very good parents, or they're mean parents or whatever. And I used to teach 5th grade, and then I taught 7th grade. And my students were always asking me, why are all these books for kids without, decent, good adults? And I thought, that's a good question. Why are they? So I made it a point, it's kind of my brand, that in all my books, you're going to find a pretty good father figure who's a hero and a warrior in himself, but he lets the kids shine, let them be the main characters of the stories. So that's kind of a theme you'll always find in my books.
So, did you kind of have like a favorite book to write?
Well, I love fantasy, all different kinds. In fact, right now I'm rereading one of my favorite fantasy series, the Ranger's Apprentice series. I don't know if you've ever read that, but I love it. But I grew up on J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, and so fantasy was always kind of my thing. But I also love Westerns because I grew up in the southwest part of the United States in New Mexico, rode horses, and was outside all the time on my horse. And so I knew I always wanted to write either fantasy, so I did that. I wanted to someday write about horses, and I've done that. And then with my Toro Moon series, I combined the two, and it's a story of kind of modern day cowboys who hunt monsters from horseback. So that's been a lot of fun.
So, when you're writing, do you find that you kind of have like a space where you write, like maybe say a room, for example, or do you kind of just like to write everywhere, like whenever you get an idea, for example?
Well, I usually write, I'm sitting in front of my desk. You can kind of see this is where I usually sit and write. A lot of times my cat Henry sits in my chair, so then I have to sit on the floor because heaven forbid that we should ever move our cats if they're comfortable, right? But I tend to write, I have a laptop, so I tend to write often in my office, but sometimes, sitting on the floor, wherever. I do try to keep some sticky notes with me. So if I'm out running errands or I'm doing something else and an idea comes to me, I can write it down.
So, when you were writing your first book, did you find that like writing it was like, well, for example, hard, but like, is there any tips that you would give people writing their first book?
You know, it's so funny because your first book will always be kind of special to you because there was no pressure, there was no internal editor or critic telling you what you shouldn't be doing. And I do miss that. So it's hard to turn that off. But something I've recently started doing with my books, several tips, let me say this. First of all, I write a synopsis, which is about a 2 or 3 page story, just an overview of the story from beginning to end. I tell myself the story in a synopsis. And in that way, I kind of have a blueprint to follow. But I tend to write my books with the big exciting scene or the ending scene first. And then I write the beginning of my story next. So now I have a beginning and an ending, and then I fill in the middle in between. It's like when you it's like when you're doing a race, like a sprint race, and you can see the finish line at the very end of the track. And so you know where you're going. So that's why I write my ending first. For me, it works. But you know what? There is no one way to write a book. You just write it however you want to write it.
So I was watching one of your podcasts, and I saw that, or I actually heard that like the way that you create your names, and I think that's kind of interesting. So how did that like come into your head?
Names for character names you're talking about.
Yeah.
I my background before I became a teacher, my background was anthropology, cultural anthropology. And I've always been fascinated by world history and world cultures. And so whenever I'm writing, whatever series I'm working on, they're always grounded in either a real culture with its own unique folklore and folk tales, or a historical time in history that again has its own unique special names. And so for me, names really kind of highlight the character's personality. There's always a story behind the names. The names are never just random. So like in my Finn Finnegan book, um, one of the heroes is named Gideon, and Gideon means savior of humankind. And that's what he is. He's a warrior that protects other people. And so the meaning behind names are really important to me. And also the way the name sounds when you say it. I have a real pet peeve about authors who use character names that all sound very much alike, like Trish, Chris, and on, and or Jake and Jack and John. And after a while, as a reader, I get confused. So I try to make each name start with a different letter than all the other characters, just to help me as a reader.
So
Go ahead.
when you were writing, did you find that you kind of had like a few inspirations?
Well, I'm always inspired by, like I said, cultures from around the world. And sometimes I'll be reading, because I read all kinds of books, not just kids' books, but I read adult books, I read nonfiction, I read poetry, I love everything. And sometimes some myth from a culture's a history will jump out at me, and I think, well, that's an interesting myth. Or a fact from history, like with Del Toro Moon. I was reading about horses, and I realized that the breed called Andalusians, which originate in Spain, were the breed of horse that most knights in armor liked to ride because they were big, strong, powerful horses, but they were calm in battle. They were smart horses. And I thought, well, what if some knights came over here to the New World with these Andalusian stallions to fight? And I thought I didn't want them to fight the indigenous first people of this country. So what could they fight? Oh, they could fight monsters. And then all of a sudden I had this image of the horse arguing with his rider. And I thought, of course, my horses have to talk. And so that's kind of where Del Toro Moon, the whole series started evolving. And I'm working on the third book in the series right now.
So, other than the third book in the series for Del Toro Moon, do you think you're going to be publishing a lot more books in the future?
I sure hope so. I have, after this third book, I still have to write one more book in the series, although my publisher would be happy for more books if I wanted to produce them. So that's great. And I still have lots of stories left to tell. I want to go back and explore some more Irish mythology. There's some great storytelling there. So yeah, I'm hoping to publish a lot more books.
So, when you were kind of like in school, did you find that you kind of had like a favorite class, and did that kind of transpire to like your inspirations?
Um, School was something that I kind of had to do and get, get decent grades. But I wasn't focused on learning. I was really focused on recess. And I just wanted to be outside playing. Um, I love the out of doors. But as I got older and became interested in anthropology and started studying history and world cultures and world religions, those really inspired me. Not in a way I thought it was ever going to end up. I never thought I would end up as a writer. I love to read. I read all the time. In fact, I always believe that writers just read and read and read and read, like stuffing themselves with storytelling. And then one day they throw up their own book. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. So I would say, though, it was my love of history and social studies and subjects like that really impact my books.
So, when you're writing for, like you said, you liked writing for like middle school and young adult, do you find you kind of start out with like a topic you wanted on, or you kind of just let your like imagination like find the story?
I tend to write what's called character-driven books. So I always start with a character that's probably a lot like me. And I always think, and almost all my characters, okay, I'm not even going to say almost, all my characters tend to be boys. And I will always start with two things. What does he want more than anything in the world? And what does he fear the most in the world? And then I go explore those two things. And a lot of times, I also throw in what is stopping him from getting the thing he wants most. And basically, that's what all real storytelling is. If you look everything from Star Wars to Disney films to anything, it's always a hero or heroine who wants something really badly, and things keep happening that stop him or her from getting them. I mean, that's what all storytelling is.
So, is there anything that you want to say in general? Maybe some tips for authors that are trying to publish more books? Yeah.
Couple of things, yes. One is always read. Read everything you can get your hands on, and not just in the genre that you love, because I would just read middle grade fantasy all the time. But I like to read, like right now, I'm reading a mystery series for adults that's set in the state of Maine, just across from the Canadian border, right where you guys are. So I'm reading that. I'm reading a book of poetry that's kind of the highlight of the Hispanic people of the United States, and rereading some other old favorites. So read everything you can, and steal ideas. When I say steal, if you see a particular turn of phrase or a way your favorite author uses verbs, write that down and then make it your own. So that's one thing I say. And the other thing is read everything you can about the publishing industry. It can be a really wild, crazy industry, ups and downs. You've got people like you who are doing these amazing YouTube podcasts. You've got book reviewers, and everyone is so kind. There's always a few grumpy people, but everyone is a really kind in the book world. So enjoy that, and be part of that.
So yeah, thank you so much for your time, and yeah.
All right. Thank you, William, for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.